My understanding is that depression, I'll generally lose 20 pounds in 2 weeks because of loss of appetite. And lithium also caused nausea and vomiting and incoordination for me, both of which were helped by smoking. And but it's not indicated. You know, so it's not
One other thing is that cannabis appears to act in a multi-system fashion, and it's not confined to just the CNS. That there are these peripheral activities apparently also, especially with antispasmodic activities. And this goes along with the smooth muscle and the GI tract, as well as the skeletal muscles, and also, to me, interestingly, in the musculature of the arteries. I just recently met a case of Berger's disease, which is a familial condition of mid-European heavy smoking Jewish males as well as Chinese. And he presented this statement to me saying that, and I've started asking this question, which comes first, the physical relief or the mental changes? And he reported that it takes 14 seconds for him to be relieved of his vasospasm and pain before the cannabis CNS mental changes take place.
Well, I think that speaks to some important discoveries that were made in 1990 and 1992. In 1990, a man by the name of Devane, again working in Israel, discovered that there is a substance now known as anandamide. I think help us to understand that why, for example, when you hear these people this afternoon talk about how cannabis is useful for them in writing or what have you, that we're beginning to see there's a physiological basis for it. And when Tom mentioned smooth muscle and so forth, it's clear that there are these CB2 receptors are very much involved in some of the things that we've talked about, the various medical utilities. Dana, a brief one?
Yes. You know something about the preparation of the IOM report, so this is really to you, but I think it's interesting to everybody in the room. Things that antagonize the glutamate cascade have been found to be anti-addictive, and this was brought to the attention of the panel. Do you think the fact that, we've shown some link to an anti-addictive effect to things that antagonize the glutamate cascade maybe had an effect on their finding that there's no physiological gateway effect, that the gateway effect is constructed by the basically prohibition of marijuana?
Well, I think there may be something to that. I think it's a little too early to say, but it certainly is opening. In 1971, when I published Marijuana Reconsidered, I remember, I was doubtful that we were going to find grave dangers to this drug that had remained occult so far. But it seemed to me that it was very important that we pursue vigorously research in this drug because of what it may teach us about brain function. And I think that what you're speaking to is we are beginning to open up that door, and I think it's going to be a very fruitful one. Yes, Steve.
Hi, I have a question for Krista. I'm basically asking for a friend of mine who suffers from manic depression, and he happens to be my first pot smoking buddy when I was a teenager. And he's over the years, he comes by and visits at high times and tells me his stories about how he has suffered from manic depression, and his doctors prescribe him to lithium, and he's constantly fighting with his doctor, his wife, and everybody else in his family to allow him to smoke marijuana. He's actually received marijuana from the New York Buyers Club in the past, and he has at this point, I think, agreed, because his family has leaned on him so heavily to not smoke pot, and they think pot is the cause of his disorder, that he shouldn't smoke, and they have him on lithium, and he's very unhappy about it. And I'm just asking, for him, what should he do?
I took lithium actually for 12 years, and lithium saved my life. However, towards the end, I couldn't even remember the first name of some of my patients who'd been my patients 12 years. And normally, like, I know all their meds, you know, I know their kids, I know their ages. I would probably be the second or probably the first physician in St. Louis that would be willing to prescribe Marinol for bipolar disorder. I have done so. It is, you know, it's not indicated, and because it's not indicated, it's difficult to get the compassionate, get from the drug company to get the medicine because it's not either AIDS-related wasting or chemotherapy-induced nausea, vomiting, although one could argue that lithium causes nausea and vomiting in some people and that it is technically chemotherapy for bipolar disorder. But he might consider a doctor who would be willing to prescribe Marinol for the bipolar disorder, and then he, you know, whether or not he would choose to augment that, at any rate, that would provide some type of legal protection.
And now, let me just say that I've had a number of patients now who find that Marinol is sometimes useful, but it's not nearly as useful as whole smoke marijuana in the treatment of bipolar disorder. Let's go to one final question.
Good morning. I'm Lynette Shaw from the American Alliance for Medical Marijuana. Hello. I've been working for 10 years with everybody on this issue, but 10 years ago, I was a much different person than I am now. I had just met Dr. Todd Mikuriya, who basically saved my life because I was extremely ill with a mysterious illness that no one could diagnose except for being clinically depressive and throwing lots and lots of pills at me. Well, I was raised in an environmental stew in the California Delta where they used to manufacture DDT, DuPont, Dow, fiberboard, paper, steel, glass, and a cannery, all within a 5-mile radius, and I was poisoned by my environment when I was growing up, as well as every other kid in my neighborhood. We all have the same thing that I've been suffering from for all my life. And I'm just starting to research now into the area of these cancer clusters, and many of us are affected by environmental illness. That's a mysterious illness that brings on immune depression, that brings on allergies, that brings on chronic fatigue, that brings on clinical depression, that brings on suicide. And when I was nearly dead, when the medical marijuana movement, I found the medical marijuana movement, or it found me, and it saved my life. And I'm a much better person, much higher functioning human now. And that's why I've devoted the rest of my life right now, to this point, to bringing this message to other sick people who are stricken by whatever ailment it is, that only marijuana can assuage these symptoms. Now, I've been working with my organization, and people have been working with me for 10 years now. The federal government is still embroiling us in a lawsuit, the Oakland Club, and that suppresses a lot of information that I would like to pass on to the world. And one thing I know that I'm doing is I'm asking everybody to keep writing and taking all this knowledge down and holding it close, so that when we win, we can bring this information to the world, and we will no longer be reviled and jailed, but the world will be coming to us to find out what's wrong with everybody, so we can help cure the world. Well, thank you.
I would like to thank this impressive group of people who have been courageous enough to share their stories with you, and to thank you all for attending.
You were saying?
Here we are in Washington, D.C., home of the vast bureaucracy, populated by half-vast people that make decisions here and have a collective reality that bears little resemblance to what happens out in the hustings. I'm Dr. Todd Mikuriya from California, from Berkeley, California, where we have a different country out there since Health and Safety Code 11362.5 became law back in 1996. Since that time, it's a different country, and we have a different set of problems. Now we have to look to law enforcement and government for appropriate implementation and compliance. It's very much like going to the next corridor up in the Nintendo game of life. Previously there were ignorant people saying things about why it shouldn't be passed. Part of the bureaucracy back here, part of the COVN, the Central
a common. Right. December